Good morning and welcome to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey on this Monday morning. You're here on a very important day. It is National Coffee Day, Mark.
Yes.
We need it here on Monday.
Isn't every day National Coffee Day in journalism?
It is for us, yes. So we're going to drink up here. A lot going on across the country here on this Monday. Did you have a good weekend, though?
I had a great weekend. Went to upstate New York. It's beautiful there. The leaves are finally starting to turn.
Is it starting?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was down in North Carolina where it's not quite underway yet, but I was in Asheville. And this was actually the weekend of the 1-year anniversary of the major flooding there. And you really get a sense when you're there in person how widespread that water damage was. And there's still scars left behind. Still a lot of areas that have not yet been cleaned up or recovered.
My mother used to live in Asheville.
Yeah.
And some of her neighbors down there are still talking about how hard it's been to come back.
But a lot of progress, too. We saw a lot of areas that have come back. So that was encouraging to see. All right. Let's check in on two big stories we're following for you this morning. Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. That's where a Sunday service turned into a scene of terror over the weekend. Police say a gunman crashed his truck into that church there, opened fire, and left dozens running for their lives. We'll have a live report on that coming up in just a bit. You know, I've been talking to a former producer of mine for my days in Philadelphia. She's from that small town. She says it's a place where really it's a suburb of Flint. Everybody knows everybody, has that small town feel. So it's a shock to all of those who are from that region. And also she points out that today public schools are closed. So the impact really being felt strongly beyond that church community itself.
Absolutely. It's been rippling throughout the country. Unfortunately, the last school shooting we saw was a church community in Minneapolis.
Exactly. And that chapel also you saw in that video destroyed by fire. And that only complicated the search for some of the victims because overnight that death count rose, as we know. Also to this, Tropical Storm Imelda is too close for comfort right now, taking shape near the Bahamas, but the latest track is showing it's taking a sharp turn out to sea. So what's pushing it away from the U.S.? Hurricane Umberto. And with the very latest, let's go to AccuWeather's Bill Waddell. Good morning, Bill. Thanks for joining us from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Looks like it's a bit breezy there. What's the latest on the storms?
Hey, good morning, guys. Yeah, this forecast much more manageable, thankfully, for the southeast coast of the United States compared to what the forecast models and our forecasts were looking like back on Friday. It's not very often that we say, essentially, thank goodness there's a big, powerful hurricane out in the Atlantic, because that is what's happening. We've got Category 4 Hurricane Umberto out in the Atlantic, and it's essentially a meteorological tug of war that these forecast models were struggling with. But this bigger storm with lower pressure, it's essentially going to help pull Tropical Storm Imelda, which is down in the Bahamas right now, as it moves to the north, paralleling the coast off the U.S. We do expect Umberto to help pull Imelda out to sea, bringing the worst of the impacts away from the southeast U.S. and out to the Atlantic. So here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, we are dealing with some rain right now that's being pushed from the north end of the storm. Palm trees barely moving. The rain and the wind are expected to kick up throughout the day, but at this point with the AccuWeather forecast, we are looking at 2 to 4 inches of rainfall from Imelda here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, wind gusts of 20 to 40 miles an hour. Again, people here in this part of the country, that's manageable, right? They could easily handle that much rain. So big changes with the forecast track. This was a very difficult storm to forecast because of so many different factors. We had that dip in the jet stream to the west of the storm, and then Umberto to the east of the storm, kind of pulling. That's why we were struggling. Which way? What's going to win out? Where's Imelda going to go? Because you can remember those forecast updates late last week. We were talking about the potential of rainfall 1 to 2 feet that could impact parts of the southeast. Thankfully, now that is not the case. All forecast models and AccuWeather now showing that Umberto is going to help pull Imelda out to sea.
And that's obviously great news, but still some wet weather along the eastern seaboard that people are going to be dealing with.
Absolutely. I mean, we are warning people here. There is the potential some places could pick up several inches of rain, more than 4 inches. Localized flooding, always a concern, reminding people not to drive down those flooded roads. But again, this situation, the forecast impacts much more manageable. A lot of people here we were speaking with yesterday and this morning breathing a big sigh of relief. I remember this time last year, We were on the road for 2 weeks nonstop for the landfall of Hurricane Helene in Florida. Then we were up in the mountains of western North Carolina covering that catastrophic flooding last year. Then we all had to hightail it back down to Florida for Hurricane Milton for that second landfall. So again, big difference from this hurricane season at this point in the year compared to this time last year. People here on the southeast coast, again, breathing a huge sigh of relief with this storm. We could see some flooding issues, but again, reminding people to stay vigilant because this has been a unique hurricane season. We are far from over, and we're going to continue to track the tropics because we do have more tropical waves expected to move off of Africa here in the coming days.
All right, Bill Waddell, thanks so much for joining us from South Carolina. We appreciate it. All right, now to our other top story. At least 4 people are dead this morning, 8 others injured after a shooting and a fire at a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. That's a suburb of Flint, as we mentioned. The shooter, who police say intentionally set fire to the building as well, was shot and killed by officers. For the latest on this, let's go to our Midwest reporter, Jeremy Ross in Chicago. Jeremy, what do you know?
Good morning, Jim and Mark. In recognition and in mourning, the Grand Blanc Community Schools are closed today. Grand Blanc, Michigan, normally a quiet, affluent, low-crime area, a suburban community, as you mentioned, bordering nearby Flint, Michigan. So a shooting there is typically unusual. A mass shooting, on the other hand, generally unheard of. Now, police believe they've identified the person responsible, saying he's 40-year-old Thomas Jacob Sanford. Sanford, hailing from Burton. That's about a 12-minute drive from the church. He's accused of crashing into, then firing at worshipers, and ultimately setting the building on fire, allegedly. All of this happening around 10:30 in the morning on Sunday during a service. Sheriff's deputies saying Sanford, a U.S. Marine veteran who served in Iraq, drove a truck displaying 2 American flags in the back, crashing it into the doors of that church. Hundreds of people were inside Grand Blanc's Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They heard a giant crash, then ultimately gunfire. Investigators say Sanford was using an assault rifle during the attack, killing at least 4, injuring at least 8 others. Sheriff's deputies say they arrived quickly after getting a 911 call, and at least 2 officers exchanging gunfire with the 40-year-old, ultimately killing him in the exchange. But not before investigators believe Sanford set the church on fire, likely with some kind of accelerant like gasoline. They're also looking into improvised devices found at the scene that could have been also used to start fires. Now, authorities commended the heroics of those inside the church, many of whom were shielding children at the time of the attack. And this includes local, state, now federal investigators looking into how and why this all happened.
Jeremy,
I can confirm at this time that the FBI is now leading the investigation and is investigating this as an act of targeted violence. FBI crisis response teams, such as our evidence response teams, SWAT, Special Agent Bomb Technicians, victim specialists, were deployed to the scene. We also have special agents who are continuing to conduct interviews and intelligence and professional staff personnel providing research and analysis.
And we know that police searched that 40-year-old's home to try and determine why any of this would happen. And so often we want to know a motive for something like this immediately. Unfortunately, nothing is confirmed at this time, and those things do take time. But no doubt investigators are looking into, amongst many possible things, was there a political motivation, religious hatred, personal vendetta, or psychological issue that could have played a role in what happened? Nothing has officially been ruled out at this time. And as first responders go through that fire scene in Grand Blanc, they are bracing themselves as more victims could be discovered. So we will watch, we will wait, and certainly our thoughts are with those folks in the community.
And initial reports, I think I read, Jeremy, there's no apparent connection, direct connection between the shooter and the church. Is that what you're hearing as well?
And that's what I am hearing on my end also, and that's sort of why the entire spectrum of how this could have happened is wide open, and investigators no doubt could learn more as they go through this man's home, his personal effects, continue to interview neighbors. One neighbor did talk to a local paper about the 40-year-old's military service And if that could have played a role, we often hear so much about PTSD, psychological issues. So that's one of many things that they're probably going to take a hard look at in the days ahead.
All right, Jeremy Ross, appreciate you joining us this morning. And meantime, the Mormon Church was already mourning the loss of their leader who died at the age of 101. Russell Nelson led major changes and helped shape the Church of the Latter-day Saints for millions of people across the world. He died at his home in Salt Lake City. He was a former heart surgeon. He pioneered open heart surgery in Utah. He also ended the use of Mormon and built the temple count to 194 temples across the world. He revised LGBTQ policies. He addressed racism. He partnered with the NAACP. So a huge impact by him. He's survived by 8 children, 57 grandchildren, and 167 great-grandchildren. So who takes over? That's the question now. Apparently, it's seen to be Dalian Oaks. He himself is 93 years old.
Right.
He's a former judge, interestingly, who has openly spoken against the LGBTQ community, expected to become the new head of the Latter-day Saints Church, since he's the most senior of the remaining apostles. That's according to the Salt Lake Tribune. So a major loss for the church there.
Tough time, particularly with what just happened in Michigan.
Absolutely. All right, elsewhere, a court hearing is set for today for the suspect charged in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson will get a chance to waive his right to a preliminary hearing. That's when a judge decides if there's enough evidence to move the case to the next step. He'll be represented now by his newly appointed legal counsel. Robinson accused of shooting Charlie Kirk at that campus event in Utah back on September 10th. Kirk, of course, the founder of the conservative think tank Turning Point USA. Authorities say text messages and DNA evidence do link Robinson to the killing, and they plan to seek the death penalty for him if he is convicted. Elsewhere, President Trump is set to meet with top congressional leaders today, just a day before a deadline to keep the government open. The president will meet with the 4 top leaders from both parties. They're going to talk about funding. Republicans want a temporary bill that keeps spending flat. Democrats, they're pushing to extend subsidies from the Affordable Care Act and also restore cuts to Medicaid. Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are calling for meaningful negotiations to avoid a shutdown. But you know what? Time is really running out. Lawmakers have to agree to a funding measure by tomorrow to keep the government operating. And to add to the pressure, the White House is reportedly threatening mass layoffs if federal workers are furloughed in the event of a shutdown. And if there is a shutdown, the president does gain added authority.
Right, to step in. But at the same time, while this is going on, about 100,000 federal workers are about to retire by Tuesday. So when you have all these things happening together at the same time, you've got to wonder what's going on in Washington. Who is actually going to run the country?
This is interesting, this meeting today. Not sure what's going to come out of it, if anything, but it is notable that it's the first time that Chuck Schumer and the president have spoken and met since President Trump's inauguration on January 20th. And it's also the first time that Trump and Jeffries have had a meeting in person. So there hasn't been a lot of interpersonal communication between these three. And as we said, of note is the expanded authority that the president is given in the event of a shutdown. And the thinking is perhaps he begins to cut programs that he doesn't feel are in line with his priorities.
And there's been a trend in the last couple of months since President Trump was elected again to office of him trying to expand his authority repeatedly.
All right. Elsewhere, Vice President J.D. Vance defended the indictment of former FBI Director James Comey, claiming he did lie under oath at a congressional hearing. Comey, as we know, was indicted by the U.S. Attorney in Virginia on Friday. President Trump says the DOJ may also be investigating former FBI Director Christopher Wray as well. President claiming Wray misled Congress about the FBI undercover agents in the January 6th crowd.
We're joined now by Cheryl Bader, Fordham University law professor and former federal prosecutor with the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. So, Ms. Bader, from your experience as a federal prosecutor, how strong does a case need to be to secure an indictment for lying under oath or obstructing a congressional proceeding?
Well, so in this case, we see that several career prosecutors who were looking at the evidence here decided that it was not strong enough to bring this case. And yet those individuals were fired, and a new prosecutor who had no prosecutorial experience or any criminal law experience whatsoever was brought in at the last minute to bring this indictment. And we saw that she went into the grand jury, her first time in the grand jury. When I was in AUSA, you had a more seasoned attorney coming in with you and teaching you about the grand jury process. She went in to secure this indictment just before it would be time barred by the statute of limitations. And it does look like there is a flimsy, what we call non-speaking indictment. In other words, the indictment just says, here are the charges, but doesn't actually lay out any of the evidence against Comey.
I know over the weekend, J.D. Vance said we're going to let the law drive this, and President Trump also claiming this is about accountability, not politics. Talk about the legal issues of that. How is that, in fact, assessed, whether this is sort of revenge or whether this is about accountability?
Well, justice is supposed to be blind. Justice isn't supposed to be blindly following what the president's wishes are. And we've seen this weaponization of the justice process, which is actually quite troubling.
The grand jury seem to be as divided as the country is. Only 14 out of 23 of the grand jurors voted to indict Comey. Is that common, or does this say anything about the case?
So, grand jury processes are secretive, and there's really a relationship between the prosecution and the grand jurors. And so the grand jurors are supposed to ask questions of the prosecutor and try to assess the evidence. And so, one of the things that I think was unusual here is that there were some other charges that the grand jurors did not want to bring. And again, just how the prosecutor couldn't even figure out how to file this was done very much at the last minute. And it does seem like this is just part of Trump's vendetta tour. We don't want to have a situation where you target an individual and then you go on a fishing expedition to look for what crimes they might have committed. And I think this raises a lot of questions in terms of Comey's defense of, vindictive prosecution and selective prosecution.
And can you shed some light on us the difference between presenting before a grand jury and getting an indictment from the panel versus what has to actually happen during a trial and the bar that's raised there in terms of getting a conviction?
Right. So the grand jury process is really a process to make sure that the prosecutor has enough evidence to bring a case forward, right? Because even the accusation is quite serious. But the trial, the prosecution has to prove every element of the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So they would have to prove that there was a corrupt intent here. They would have to prove that the proceedings were actually disrupted, right? So it's a much higher standard than the grand jury process of just finding that there's a probable cause and cause to go forward with the case.
Up to this point, the Justice Department has historically tried to keep itself separate from politics. Does this now indicate a shift in how politicians could influence federal prosecutions, and what should the public be aware of?
Absolutely. This is very troubling because there's always been this norm and this culture that there's an independence to the prosecution. And when I was a federal prosecutor, I was a Democrat in a Republican administration, and I never felt that politics, was ever the question. We looked at the law and the facts and made decisions based on just those things, and not who the president was or what the president wanted. And there's a real erosion of that norm. And now judges are looking much more skeptically at what prosecutors do, the motions that they're filing, the arguments that they're making. And so we're going to see much more responsibility on the judiciary and an erosion of this concept of regularity, that we can trust that the prosecutors are not, what we think of, lawyers as like hired guns, that they are representing the public and not a private interest. And so, again, not that I'm going to glorify prosecutors. I tell my students that we have to look very critically at our criminal justice system, and there are many, many flaws. But having it be a personal vendetta tool for politics is just going to be a much greater erosion to the system.
Professor Cheryl Bader, we thank you for being here on Connecting America. And we know on Friday the president called for other so-called corrupt radical left to be indicted as well. So we'll see if there continues to be other names that are brought before.
Yeah, he's made a list and he's checking it twice.
Speaking of the president, he's saying that he will join Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth for an unusual meeting of top generals and admirals coming up tomorrow. Late last week, the Defense Secretary Hegseth ordered hundreds of senior generals and admirals from around the world to Quantico Marine Base in Virginia. The purpose of that gathering reportedly described as boosting esprit de corps. Hegseth is expected to tout military accomplishments under his leadership. Now, these messages are typically delivered by memo or by teleconference, but this time they said, get yourselves to Virginia from across the world. So it's very unusual. Hegseth is pushing a rebrand of the Pentagon, as we know, as the Department of War. There was, speculation early on because the purpose of the meeting wasn't divulged, whether there would be some sort of announcement of a cut in the number of four-star officers.
Right. Esprit de corps seems somehow particularly vague, and there's security and cost concerns raised with hundreds of high-ranking generals and the president now planning to be there. You got to think of the security concerns of having so many members of the military, and of course the commander-in-chief of the military close by, and the Secretary of Defense. What is it going to take to make it secure?
Yeah, you raised the question of the cost of this. You could do this by teleconference, obviously, and you're bringing people in from across the globe for what I've read may only be about a 30-minute period of remarks from the defense secretary and obviously other remarks from the president. And then they disperse. So we'll have more on that in the next 24 hours or so. Connecting America, though, is just getting started here on this Monday. Up next, we're going to tell you about a new group with grandparents speaking out now on vaccines. So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America on this Monday morning. Grandparents have always been the voice of experience, right? And now they're taking that voice public, if you will. A new movement called Grandparents for Vaccines is urging families to tune out politics and listen to doctors when it comes to protecting kids. The group launched September 7th, fittingly National Grandparents' Day.
One of the leading voices behind this movement to counter the anti-vax rhetoric is Ohio-based pediatrician Dr. Arthur Lavin, and he's joining us now. Arthur, tell us about Grandparents for Vaccines and how did this movement get started?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on the show. You know, the grandparents of America want their grandchildren to be safe. And we love the idea of spreading this word through Connecting America in a diner because, you know, our grandchildren live in villages and cities around the country. So Grandparents for Vaccines is trying to mobilize the voices of all 67 million of America's grandparents because we're the generation that lived through these diseases. We saw what the world was like before vaccines were available to protect our grandchildren. And today we want to be sure our grandchildren are protected. So we're organized, really, we're here to be for a force to help our grandchildren remain safe.
How are you getting the message out there and how receptive are you finding people are to that message about getting vaccinated? I was just asking how you're getting the message out there and how receptive you're finding people are to the message.
Thank you so much. So we've got people around the United States, grandparents and grandmothers who have joined the group. And we've got people in cities around the country who are coming to their communities to spread the word. We're coming to America through programs like Connecting America, writing op-eds in the papers, and we'll be holding events. And I'm really glad that you're featuring the grand book clubs. We're asking grandparents to spark events like these. We have books, as you showed, on our website, such as this, that really help get the word out about how important it is to be protected.
You talk about the involvement of grandparents. What kind of unique role can grandparents play in this effort?
Well, you know, grandparents, as I say, have this special voice. We've got people who, you know, lost brothers and sisters to polio and measles. And you see this door behind me. We want to make sure the vaccines is the door that keeps the diseases from coming into our grandchildren's lives. We want to make sure that door stays closed. And I can't think of a more powerful voice than grandparents, not just because we had these experiences, but because the love for our grandchildren, I think, is so important for America to hear.
I know we've seen several states, I think the number is 4, that are talking about implementing their own vaccine mandates because they don't agree with the federal government's guidelines on vaccines. Do you think that other states should do the same at this point, Arthur?
Well, I'm really here as a grandfather, not so much as a policy advisor, but as a grandfather, I do believe that our community should do everything in its power to make sure our grandchildren are protected. Whatever course makes that most likely, I think, is the one that we support.
What does your group, do you think, needs to do going forward? Should there be more grassroots outreach, or do you want to go directly to lawmakers in state capitals and in D.C.?
No, we're not really interested in going to DC. We're interested in coming to communities that your diner so represents. We're interested in grassroots efforts. Our website, grandparentsvaccines.com, is up and running. People can go there and hit the join button to join us. They can hit a share your story button. We have a YouTube channel that will feature the stories of grandparents across America. And so our first step is asking the grandparents of America come join us. Not just grandparents, but anyone who is allied with our grandchildren. You know, we all are grandchildren. So we're asking everyone to get involved.
All right, grandparentsvaccines.com. That's the website people can go to learn more about what you are up to. We appreciate you being here, Arthur Lavin. Thanks so much.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to working together again. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Coming up next, the races for New York mayor and New Jersey governor get an early October surprise. We'll have more on that when we come right back here on Connecting America. Welcome back to Connecting America, coming to you from the Sunrise Diner here in Roselle Park, New Jersey on National Coffee Day, Monday morning. We need plenty of it because we are dishing the top stories from around the country here, including a big political story out of New York City. The mayor there, Eric Adams, he is bowing out of his reelection bid. That happening just over the weekend with just 5 weeks to Election Day. The embattled mayor said he could no longer see a path to winning the race. He announced his withdrawal in a video message featuring Frank Sinatra's My Way song. He did not endorse any of the candidates in the race, warned against extremism in city politics. The mayor blamed media speculation and loss of campaign funds for his big decision. You recall much of that speculation centered around reports that President Trump perhaps was planning to give Adams some sort of federal post to get him out of the race. That did not materialize. He didn't talk about that at all in announcing this decision. But we also know that campaign has been plagued by scandals, federal investigations, and also the poll numbers just were not good.
No. And Adams' exit may benefit former governor and third-party candidate Andrew Cuomo in his challenge to Democrat socialist frontrunner Zoran Mamdani, also running as Republican Curtis Sliwa, the founder of the Guardian Angels. His name, Adams, will remain on the ballot, making him the first New York City mayor since David Dinkins to serve just one term.
I know Mamdani has been talking about this, and he said, this is a race between us and the failed politics that we've seen, whether it's Andrew Cuomo or Eric Adams. It's politics where Donald Trump and billionaire donors are determining the actions of failed executives. We're going to show that they can't dictate the outcome of this race. The big question here is, with Adams out, where do his supporters go? I mean, do they then go to Cuomo, or is the race still Mamdani's?
I think Cuomo is particularly hoping he's going to pick up Black and Orthodox Jewish supporters that up to this point have been with Adams. But even President Trump has said, which some say President Trump has been gravitating potentially towards Cuomo, that Trump knows in his mind that Mamdani can only win if there's potentially two candidates. Mamdani is going to win otherwise, but Cuomo can only win if there's only two candidates. So now there's pressure on Sliwa to potentially drop out of the race.
And there was a lot of discussion that President Trump wanted Adams to drop out of the race to try to help Cuomo, but also that question of, doesn't the president want Mamdani in office so that he can sort of be his punching bag?
Exactly. And, President Trump has a habit of trying to demonize his opposition.
Mm-hmm.
What better than Mamdani to potentially play that role?
The other big story this morning, political story of the day, is in New Jersey, right here where we are, with the revelation of a major gubernatorial candidate's involvement in an infamous Navy cheating scandal and allegations that her personnel records were deliberately released without blacking out her own Social Security number and other vital information, her address. There are only two governors' races this fall, the other in Maryland, and this one the most watched in the entire country. Joining us this morning, New Jersey Globe editor-in-chief David Wildstein. His online news site broke that story last week that Democrat Mikey Sherrill was not allowed to walk with her Naval Academy commencement at graduation because she didn't report her cheating classmates. Her GOP opponent, Jack Ciattarelli, has particularly called her out for covering this up. David Wildstein, thanks for joining us this morning on Connecting America.
Thanks, and congrats on your new show, and congrats on getting to have breakfast with Bonanno every morning.
Thank you.
That's going to be quite the pleasure,
Absolutely,
you,
it is. Yeah. So far, it's just coffee this morning. We haven't had any breakfast yet. So before we get to breakfast, walk us through this story that you broke. We've seen the campaign commercials running with Congresswoman Sherrill boasting about her Navy record. She doesn't deny what she did. So why is this relevant? She's been out front about, I didn't walk at graduation.
Well, she hasn't denied it, except that it was a different answer to the question that I got in 2018 when I first asked it and was told she had no connection to it whatsoever. Now the question is exactly what happened, and did she see the test first or didn't she see it first? There've been some. She told ABC News something a little bit different than what she told me. And listen, Mikey Sherrill, and I've covered her since she first became a congressional candidate. I mean, this is a decent, honorable woman, and somehow she's gotten herself into what could be a fatal problem in her campaign for governor. A lot of people in New Jersey, I'm one of them, think she should just proactively release her disciplinary record and show everybody once and for all exactly what happened.
Now, Mr. Wildstein, there's two distinct but overlapping things happening now. There are reports that the National Archives released her information without redacting her personal information, like her social security number, her address, her parents' address. Democrats are alleging this is another example of the Trump administration weaponizing politics. So, is this factor
Yeah.
offsetting in any way what the accusations are about cheating?
You know what we don't know? And first of all, I'll say if the Trump administration directed the National Archives to give out Mikey Sherrill's personal information, that's horrible. You don't do that to our veterans. You don't do that to anybody. But what we don't know is, was this some real big political scandal? Is this something where the White House had a plan to get this record out there, or is it just some bureaucrat in a Freedom of Information Act office who messed up, which happens all the time? That's why it's probably important to just get everything out there at once, see exactly what's there before it's really too late for anything to be done about it.
We know Chitterelli's campaign has said this raises questions about Mikey Sherrill's life story and her transparency. Drill down for us, though, how you think this impacts an already tight race.
Well, I mean, the very essence of Mikey Sherrill's being is that she was an Annapolis graduate. That's where she learned the honor code. That she flew helicopters in the Navy. That she went on to seek justice as a federal prosecutor. And if you start poking holes in the foundation of her whole life story, then it raises a lot more questions than there are answers. And I think that's what people are most concerned about right now.
So,
And I
in the
hope, by the way,
end,
I hope it's all wrong. I hope this is all wrong. It'd be, Jersey, as you guys know, sitting in a diner, it's, we've had our problems over the years, and uh, you really, Jersey people don't want another problem. They want to know that everybody running for office has is squeaky clean, and I hope that's what we find out. But we won't find out unless those documents are released.
So, in the end, in what is now a particularly tight race, which is being watched around the country, what do you think the biggest issue is? Is it what Mikey Sherrill says, that Jack Ciattarelli is just a stooge somehow for Donald Trump? Is it the idea that Jack Ciattarelli says that Mikey Sherrill is involved in cheating, therefore somehow impugning her naval record? Or, as one famous pundit and advisor said, Democrat James Carville, is it just the economy, stupid?
Until money is put behind a message, until you start seeing Jack Ciattarelli spend a couple $1 million on New York and Philly TV talking about this issue, then this is really basically insider stuff. This is not what the voters want. And this is in the control of these candidates. Right now, everybody's talking about property taxes. They're talking about electricity costs driving through the roof. They're talking about education, and what we don't know is this issue going to take hold of the voters? And if voters don't know about it, Mark, you know this. I've talked about this a million times. New Jersey voters have never been less informed. The daily newspapers have, some of them stopped printing. Circulation has gone way down. Voters aren't getting their information as easily as they used to. And the only way they're going to know that there's a scandal going on, if it's a scandal at all, is if one or both of the candidates start talking about it in TV ads.
So, what's going to happen in the last couple of weeks of this campaign? Are we just going to keep hearing between the two candidates accusations back and forth about a possible scandal, or are we going to start hearing about the real issues that affect New Jerseyans?
I think you've been hearing about the real issues. The question is this a real issue? I would imagine that both sides have already run into the field to do some polling to see if this really makes a difference. Do voters care? Is a state that has sent 2 U.S. senators in my lifetime to prison, one sitting there now after the FBI found gold bars in his closet. Uh, you know, you know, are people going to look at that? Are they so hardened to Jersey style stories that they're going to say, "Oh, isn't that adorable? She may have gotten an advanced copy of her test 31 years ago." So I don't know. I mean, that's where we're going to be right now. Is we're in this wait and see phase to see if this is an issue voters care about, or do they say, and I'm not casting any aspersions, but do they say, I don't care if Mikey Sherrill cheated on a test in college. I want my electricity costs cut. And we won't know that until we see if the candidates put money on it. If you don't see this on television pretty soon, not digital ads, not press releases, but network and cable television, if you don't see it soon, then the answer is no, it's not an issue.
All right, David Wildstein, thanks for being here on Connecting America. We appreciate it. And we should point out, Mike Sherrill did graduate. She was commissioned as an officer. She just wasn't allowed to walk at graduation. So
Last year, she
Yeah.
even got the highest civilian award from the Navy for her service up to this point.
all right, it relates to our question of the day, right?
Exactly. So, would you turn in your classmates for cheating, or would you look away? You see our choices here. 1, always turn them in. 2, don't rat them out. Something you hear in New Jersey a lot. And 3, this depends on the situation. You see that QR code on the bottom of the screen? Snap it with your mobile phone and cast your vote. We'll check in throughout the hour. So, what would you do?
Well, there's that whole military overlay and
Right.
and esprit de corps, if you will, which the Secretary of Defense is going to be talking about to the military leaders coming up tomorrow.
Right.
You're in the trenches with your fellow comrades, if you
Right.
will. Do you turn on them and do you rat them out?
I mean, look,
that's the question.
there is the formal code
Mm-hmm.
written by the Navy or the Army or the Marines, and then there's the unwritten code.
Mm-hmm.
These are people who literally are going to put your life on the line with. With that type of esprit de corps, that type of bonding, is that really the thing to do?
All right, it's always an interesting race in New Jersey, and I should point out that we talked about the 2 gubernatorial races that are coming up, and we mentioned Maryland. It's Virginia is the other state, of course, that has
Correct.
a race for governor. Wanted to make that clear.
Up next, the controversy over head injuries and high school football, and our recent mass shooting is bringing new attention to this. Connecting America, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to Connecting America on this Monday morning from the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey. We know bacon makes everything better, so time to bring home the bacon for you with an interesting way to save money. But before we get to that, we have to talk about this story, Mark. I have three quick questions for you. Would
Yes.
you ever consider climbing Mount Everest?
Absolutely.
29,000 feet.
Absolutely. Wonderful life goal. Would want to do it, get to the top of the mountain, see the whole world.
With some training ahead of time, I hope.
One would hope so.
All right. Second question, would you ski down it once you reach the top?
In my case, like I've been skiing once in my life,
That'd be a no.
possibly inadvisable.
All right. So I guess the third question, the answer is easy. Would you do it without oxygen?
You know what? If you made it that top, you think you make it, go all the way.
Have you heard about this, what this guy did?
That's right.
A Polish skier, daredevil, Andrzej Bargel. He skied down Everest without oxygen. This is video. This is just wild. Look at him.
Mm-hmm.
He is the first person to ski down the world's highest mountain without any oxygen. Took him a full day to descend down Everest on those skis. And this is no green run. This is a triple black mark.
Mm-hmm.
It's really dangerous. Includes ice falls, crevasses, and here's the understatement of the year. Bargel called it, quote, the hardest thing he's ever done. And I'm glad he took that on because there is no way that I could ever think about doing something like that. I mean,
look, I tell you
that's
what,
some talent.
I can't be completely neutral about this. My maternal grandmother's name was Francisca Karolina Wisniewska.
So that means you
Completely
should be doing
Polish.
this?
That means Polish people have guts, right? Oh, the odds are against you? Whatever. I'm still going to go down that hill no matter what.
And look at the scenery. I mean, look at the view. It's just amazing. All right. Congratulations to him. It's quite a feat.
Amazing.
Bad Bunny. Did you hear this? He's just announced as the Super Bowl 60's halftime performer. There was, of course, a lot of speculation. Was it going to be Taylor Swift? What happened?
Well, who knows? She reportedly walked away after not seeing eye to eye with the NFL about some of the things she wanted to make sure happened as her performance was being set up. The performance was set for February 8th at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara, California.
All right.
So,
Bad Bunny fan?
Well, in Newark, New Jersey, there are many Puerto Ricans.
Yes.
And all huge fans of Bad Bunny. The man has a legitimate following. I think he can very easily step into the shoes of Taylor Swift.
I wonder what some of those demands were from her.
I don't know. I don't think it has anything to do with how many M&Ms there were backstage or,
right.
Or, it's something else. I mean, look, one thing you got to think about in her case is security. She's become such a global figure. Maybe there's certain extra things she wanted in place.
All right, we'll try and figure out what it was, what the big deal breaker was. Hey, as we mentioned, it is National Coffee Day today. If you need to get a cup to get going and can't join us at the diner, that's okay. We can save you some money. Here's our Bring Home the Bacon segment. Across the country, Dunkin', Krispy Kreme, and Panera, some of the chains offering some coffee deals today, including free coffee in some places. You can check out their websites for more details. So, however you take it, it's National Coffee Day. We just need a little milk in here, and we're
little help.
Good to go.
I'm particular to light and sweet, but for many people, black only.
So I know you were busy. Starting on Friday with your second hat that you wear as a reporter for the New York Times,
right,
on a serious story that involves football and head injuries.
Yeah.
And the impact of the game.
Right.
Yeah.
So as my work as a contributing writer for the New York Times, there was the whole factor of Shane Timor. Shane Timor is the man who shot up Midtown recently, unfortunately fatalities. It was diagnosed after his death that he was suffering from CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question about CTE. Is there any indication that the disease contributed to his actions, or that's still unknown? Many people aren't sure yet about the effect of CTE, even from a young age. But, can you sum up the main reportings of this report? Well, you can uncover about CTE and football. You have to think about what are people learning from the measures that are being taken. I talked to a lot of people in Bergen County, particularly in New
Mhm.
Jersey, even though reporters went all over the country, went to Wisconsin, Texas, Mississippi, and Florida. It is a national game. Is it better equipment? Is it going to be better ways to play the game? But a lot of parents had a lot of reservations about this. They said, listen, we've read about these reports, we've seen the damage. Is this something we really want our children to do? And a man I spoke to said, listen, my son's playing baseball, and I'm glad for that. God forbid he suffered any brain damage.
We know Tamura he was 27,
Right,
so he was still young, and he only played through high school football, but started, I think I read, at the age of 6.
right.
So that question of youth football players who start really young, they don't have to be professional NFL players to take hits that are going to perhaps have an impact on this disease.
No, and there have been reports, some of the studies say the impact from this can happen as early as 12.
Mhm.
And remember, there are other sports out there. There's football, but there's also soccer, people suffering from concussions, lacrosse, where people are whipping balls at your head and could potentially hurt you. Same thing with hockey. A slap shot could seriously damage you going forward. And it's something people are now seriously thinking about. But, football is such a national obsession. To try to convince people, maybe you shouldn't be playing football.
Mhm.
That could be a really hard sell for a lot of people. And, reporting on the ground, seeing that type of ambivalence, it's pretty obvious. Football's not going away. The question is, how are people going to react to it?
All right. We appreciate that reporting you did on the story. It's a really important issue. Hey, if you want to connect with us, you can download the Best of Connecting America every day wherever you get your podcasts. Just type in Connecting America in that search bar. You'll find us. Or you can find us on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you like to hang out on social media. There are our handles. We'll be back at the top of the hour with a live update from AccuWeather on the impact of the storms Umberto and Imelda. We're going to check in with some friends in Texas on the missing Powerball winner from their small town. So go away.
The views expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of USA Today or its affiliates.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey on this Monday morning for you. The sun is out here in New Jersey.
Beautiful New Jersey. The sun's streaming through the windows of the diner. Always poetic, but like T.S. Eliot said, we measure out our lives in coffee spoons.
Yes, we do.
Right.
And we're also keeping an eye, though, on an area where perhaps the sun is not shining. A quick look at the Atlantic. Hurricane Umberto, now a powerful Category 5 storm. Satellite images show the massive scale of this thing. But meteorologists say Umberto's path could help limit the impact of Tropical Storm Imelda on the U.S. So let's bring in AccuWeather meteorologist Alex De Silva to explain how both of these storms are interacting and how that could impact the eastern seaboard. Good morning, Alex.
Good morning, guys. Yeah, we still have Umberto to the east here. Now it's a Category 4 hurricane as of the last update from the National Hurricane Center, but certainly been a very impressive year. We've had 3 major hurricanes, and 2 of them have reached Category 5 strength. So, of course, one of them being Umberto right there. But now we're tracking Imelda here in the northern portions of the Bahamas. A lot more disorganized than its counterpart here to the east. Certainly, you can see that right there. But we're going to be seeing a little bit of an interaction here between the 2 of them. We're going to be seeing, I think, a little bit of a dance called the Fujiwara effect here. Both of the dancers are starting to get into place here. And this is a phenomena that happens when 2 cyclones get within about 850 miles of one another or so. And these 2 cyclones are about 625 or 650 miles apart right now. So well within that 850 mile threshold that you need for them to start essentially interacting with one another. So let's just assume this is Umberto to the north, and then you have the other system here to the southwest, which is expected to become a hurricane here in the next day or so. There's a tendency to have some counterclockwise motion here once you get those storms close to one another. So that's why we're going to be seeing that right hook with Imelda here over the next day or so. So this Fujiwara effect is really sparing the United States, I think, from more severe impacts, because I think if Umberto did not exist, if that storm was not there, I really believe that Imelda would actually go straight up into the Carolinas. But it's really Umberto that's going to help to tug that storm to the east. But nevertheless, we still do expect some pretty heavy rain along coastal areas of the Carolinas especially. The rain is already starting to reach those areas right now, so expect a couple of inches, especially in those coastal areas. It's going to be breezy out there as well, so just keep an eye. There could be some localized flooding and stuff like that, but I think the big story is going to be those rip currents along the entirety of the East Coast from Miami all the way up through Maine this entire week and even into the beginning of the weekend. So please do be careful out there if you're going to be at the beaches, and certainly listen to those lifeguards. If they're telling you not to go in the water, it is certainly way too dangerous, and we want people to stay safe out there for this week.
Anything else you're watching, Alex?
Yeah, there's a couple other areas that we're watching. Of course, we're getting ready to move into the month of October right now. So a couple other areas that we're keeping an eye on for low chances of development. One out here in the Bay of Campeche. The good news is that if anything develops in this area at the end of the month, it's likely to go straight south down into Mexico. So really no threat to the United States there. And then another tropical wave is getting ready to emerge off of Africa here over the next week or so. So that'll be the next thing I think we're really going to have to keep an eye on. But remember, guys, hurricane season has 2 more full months. It ends at the end of November, so we still have a long way to go.
All right, Alex De Silva, thanks so much for joining us from AccuWeather this morning. Other news this morning that we're keeping an eye on. At least 4 people are dead, 8 others injured now after a shooting and this fire at a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. One of those victims remains in critical condition this morning. The shooter, who police say intentionally set fire to the building, was later shot and killed by officers. He's been identified now as 40-year-old Thomas Jacob Sanford. He's a former U.S. Marine who lived in the neighboring city of Burton. These are suburbs of Flint, Michigan. No motive apparent at this point. Investigators are warning there could be more victims because they still have to search through the remains of that church after that huge fire. The FBI is the lead investigating agency on this, and they're classifying this as an act of targeted violence.
I can confirm at this time that the FBI is now leading the investigation and is investigating this as an act of targeted violence. FBI crisis response teams, such as our evidence response teams, SWAT, Special Agent Bomb Technicians, victim specialists, were deployed to the scene. We also have special agents who are continuing to conduct interviews and intelligence and professional staff personnel providing research and analysis.
President Trump, remarking on this incident, called it, quote, yet another targeted attack on Christians and part of what he called an epidemic of violence. This happening right during services yesterday. And we've heard some acts of heroism on the part of the adult parishioners, shielding children, reminiscent of what we saw in Minneapolis at the start of the school year at that church shooting at the Annunciation Church.
You know, stories of young boys in Minneapolis shielding their classmates, you know, who are facing death. But this once again leads to the whole discussion about why do these mass shootings keep happening over and over? Some people cite mental health. Some people say there should be more gun control. And as these shootings keep happening, unfortunately, this debate's going to continue as we see the shocking results of this violence.
Yeah, and investigators there in Michigan this morning trying to figure out whether there was any connection specifically to that church on the part of the shooter. Early reports were no known connection. They're obviously going to be searching through his home, through any electronics, to try to determine what the motivation might have been for that. We'll keep you posted. Court hearing is set today, meantime, for the suspect charged in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Tyler Robinson will get a chance to waive his right to a preliminary hearing. That's when a judge decides if there's enough evidence to move the case to the next step. He will now be represented by his newly appointed legal counsel. Of course, he's accused of shooting Kirk at that campus event in Utah back on September 10th. Kirk was the founder of Turning Point USA. Authorities say text messages and DNA evidence link Robinson to the killing, and they plan to seek the death penalty for him if he is convicted. Elsewhere, to the nation's capital, a big story we're watching there. President Trump set to meet with top congressional leaders today, just a day before that deadline, to keep the government from shutting down. The president will meet with the 4 top leaders from both parties to talk about funding issues. Republicans, they want a temporary bill that keeps spending flat, but the Democrats are pushing to extend healthcare subsidies and restore Medicaid cuts. Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are calling for meaningful negotiations to avoid a shutdown, but they don't have a lot of time for these negotiations. Time is running out. Lawmakers have to agree to a funding measure by tomorrow to keep the government operating.
And to add to the pressure, the White House is reportedly threatening mass layoffs if federal workers are furloughed in the event of a shutdown.
Right, and in the event of a shutdown, as we've been saying, the president is given greater authority. He could, in fact, potentially cut programs that he doesn't believe deserve funding and that aren't in line with his priorities.
And there have been so many cuts already.
Right, exactly. He's, meantime, going to be busy with the defense secretary as well in the nation's capital, actually just outside in Virginia. President Trump saying he will join the defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, for what's really an unusual meeting of the top generals and admirals from across the world tomorrow. Late last week, Hegseth ordered hundreds of senior generals and admirals from around the world to Quantico Marine Base. The purpose of the gathering, reportedly described as boosting the esprit de corps in the military. Hegseth also plans to tout military accomplishments under his leadership. Now, this is a message, as we've been saying, that's typically delivered in a memo or via teleconference, but no. The defense secretary said, I want you in person, get to Virginia. And initially, there were big questions about what was the purpose of this meeting.
Right. Well,
nobody seemed to know why.
One wonders if this has to do with the rebranding by Hegseth, saying, we don't want to call it Department of Defense anymore. We want to call it the Department of War. You know, I don't know. Are they gathering all the generals to say we're taking a more offensive tack? You know, what is the direction of the armed forces going forward?
And they come from across the world
right.
At great expense with a lot of security necessary now, especially when you add the layer of President Trump joining that meeting, that gathering, to say a few remarks as well. And then they disperse and presumably go back to their headquarters. So, a lot of effort to impart this message in person.
Right. And, serious security concerns. You're putting all these top brass in one place at one time. This can't be easy.
Elsewhere, big change to how foreign workers can legally work in this country. It has corporate America concerned this morning. The president announced a new $100,000 fee for companies applying for foreign workers through what are known as H-1B visas. This is a huge jump from the current four-figure fees. His supporters say one side effect could be more high-paying jobs for Americans. But the move has sparked a lot of confusion over the past few days. Who's paying for this? Who's affected? What does it mean for the tech industry and foreign workers trying to come to the U.S. for these specialty jobs? And we're joined this morning by attorney Nandita Ruchandani with KPPB Law in Connecticut to help break this down for us. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, because I know there's been so much confusion about this. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is this new H-1B fee, and do we know who has to pay it?
The H-1B fee, thank you so much for having me on, first of all. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this really important issue. The H-1B $100,000 fee, when it came out on Friday night on the 19th, was written in a proclamation that actually did not give us a lot of details and made everything a little bit more complicated than we had expected that anything would be, because the way it was written, it wasn't clear whether it would apply to people who presently had H-1s. By the plain wording, it did, which meant that people that had travel plans and so forth had to cancel them, had to come back, get off planes. I'm sure people have seen the videos of like mass deplanings because people were scared that they were going to get stuck outside the country. USCIS, United States Immigration and Citizenship Service, and then CBP, which is Customs and Border Patrol, quickly then gave out clarifications to then narrow down the field of the people that were affected by this. And so now at this moment, what we have is, and it's an evolving situation, is that the fee will be applied to new petitions filed for persons who are not yet in the United States. Okay. But it's not clear that when the way that it is worded, petition is a blanket word for the actual application, right? So if someone has a H-1B status in the United States and they've already had a petition filed for them, when we do a change of employer, we file what's called a new petition. So does this apply to that or not? It's not clear. Even though it says that if you stay with your same employer, it won't apply to you if you want to come in and out of the U.S.
Now, these are very serious numbers. $100,000 is a really big leap from the $2,000 to $5,000 employers were used to. How is this affecting with the companies that you're representing?
It's devastating. Like I've done H-1Bs for teachers. Imagine school districts having to pay this to get in math teachers, for example. Okay, they're not going to be able to do it. The anybody that is in say an engineering firm, right? They don't make the tech dollars. The engineering firms that do municipal water supply construction and so forth, they have normal people like us who are trying to make a living, and they don't have $100,000 for these people. It's going to destroy American companies. This is going to be really big. It's not just the tech giants. They can probably afford it. I don't know. But I know that my clients really cannot afford this.
What about the notion that this would open up these jobs, these highly skilled jobs, to more American workers by weeding out who can afford to pay this $100,000 fee and bring workers in from foreign countries?
So the way it works right now for the majority of my clients is that they hire H-1B workers because they cannot find sufficient, not that there aren't talented Americans. I grew up here, I'm an American. Yes, we're talented. We have the education and so forth. We just don't produce enough talented and educated people to fill all of the roles that are available. And honestly, it's a pain in the patoot. If you could hire an American, why would you not
Term.
hire an American? Okay. I mean, it's more difficult to go through this process and have the government oversight and have to register and have to promise to pay, because when you're doing the application, you have to file what's called an LCA, which is a labor condition attestation, where you have to promise how much you're going to pay this person, how many hours they're going to work, where are they going to work. If they have multiple job sites, we have to fill that in. So we have to tell the government not only what we're paying the person, but also where are they going to be at any given time, what are they doing, and so forth. So there's a lot of regulation that you don't have with American workers. And honestly, these guys pay taxes into the system. They're not eligible for Social Security, but they pay Social Security in, and especially if they're high earners, that they're helping our tax base.
Now, you're talking about these workers and the need to fill these jobs here in America. But for these foreign workers who are planning to apply, especially from countries like India and China, what can they do right now?
Right now, the American companies actually just need to talk to their representatives in Congress and be like, we cannot afford this. You need to help us. The White House needs to hear stories from employers and employees who are doing the work on the ground, the teachers, the doctors that are going to be affected by this. Everybody that is using these visas is not only a tech worker, where that's where the narrative has been. However, they are a majority of the H-1Bs that are granted, and most of them are granted, 70% are granted to people of Indian origin. And that's a testament to the sheer number of qualified people that are created in the Indian education system, because the volume of, the population is huge. And so they have a large number of people that are created in terms of being qualified because they're English fluent. They have the education where the American institutions have often connected with the Indian institutions. For example, the IITs are the Indian equivalent of MIT and their sister schools. So they're very highly qualified people, and they don't really have a lot of power. So it's going to be really difficult at this point. Now, if somebody comes here, it's not clear whether somebody comes here on a student visa, completes their visa, does what's called OPT, which is optional practical training, which is granted to people who finish their degrees in the United States. And if you're in STEM, you can get up to 36 months, where you have work authorization, you remain in a student status, and you can apply for a green card or for H-1B status to be able to work here. But literally, that is the only path. So you imagine you come to a country to do your master's or your PhD or whatever, and then you have 3 years to work off that debt or whatever, and then you have no visa available for you. It becomes a very difficult situation.
All right, Nandita Ruchandani, we appreciate you're a font of information. I know her clients obviously appreciate her depth of knowledge. Again, though, the president is arguing these are jobs that Americans should fill in many of these cases, and that's the impetus for this higher fee. That's
At the
now
same
put in
time,
place.
we now operate in a global economy. These people are critical if we want to maintain some sort of technological advantage over, let's say China, who's becoming increasingly competitive, this rising power in Asia.
Well, we also saw the confusion over the rollout of the announcement of this. You had the Secretary of Commerce saying it was an annual fee, and then the White House had to clarify and say, no, it's a one-time fee. So obviously, having people like the attorney we just had on, very helpful because they are a wealth of knowledge. So
Right.
if you have questions, obviously you want to seek professional advice.
And those attorneys are about to be very busy.
Yes. Coming up after the break, one of the two winners of the $1.8 billion Powerball jackpot has yet to come forward. Is it you? We're going to hear from local DJs in the Texas town where the winning ticket was sold when we come right back. Welcome back to Connecting America on this Monday morning. You know, last week, one of the two winners of the $1.8 billion Powerball jackpot came forward in Missouri to claim his prize. The winner chose to remain anonymous, took the cash prize, which was $410 million after taxes. Lottery officials described him as a homebody who said he wanted to take some time off. Probably a pretty good plan. Enjoy the experience, maybe just sitting at home, but he knew his wife would, quote, drag him out of town now. Honey, let's go on a trip.
French
Right?
Riviera, here we come.
The second winner who bought his or her ticket, though, in the small town of Fredericksburg, Texas, about 75 miles west of Austin. We don't know who that is. And joining us now from the area, radio host Jerry Sotelo and Sugar Baby Shane Williams with 107.9 KFAN Texas Rebel Radio. Guys, welcome back to Connecting America. You're both still at work, so we can assume that it's neither one of you who is the second winner of the lottery. It's a small town, right? Fredericksburg. There's got to be scuttlebutt about who this might be.
Now, you never know. We might be such dedicated employees that we're here anyway. You don't know that we didn't win.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I would much rather be on a beach sipping Mai Tais. I gotta say, I'd probably be rather doing that.
So you're not on the beach. You guys are both at work. Texas is one of 19 states, right, where the winners can remain anonymous. So we may never know. But again, what's the talk of the town about who it might be? Is anybody acting differently around town?
I think everyone's got their own individual theories, which is kind of the interesting thing. I mean, when we came on last time, I said that it could be a college student, but at the same time, you think that would get leaked publicly because college students aren't very good at keeping their mouths shut. So at least I wasn't very good in college at that. So I don't know. I mean, no one's really acting any differently per se. And I think that's exactly what I'd be doing, though, if I ended up winning it.
In a small town, obviously word leaks out somehow, somewhere, but we haven't heard a darn thing. We've heard rumors, but nobody's come forward that we're aware of.
So maybe it's not somebody from
not one of my
Fredericksburg.
friends. I'm sorry?
I was saying, so maybe it's not somebody from your town, you know, somebody passing through town.
I think they want to remain anonymous. I certainly would. I think we mentioned that last week. By the way, we mentioned last week about Fredericksburg, and we appreciate you all asking about us. I just mentioned about all the wineries. Now, we are also the hometown of the fleet admiral from the Pacific War of the Pacific Fleet, Chester Nimitz. He's from Fredericksburg. And, of course, President LBJ, born right down the road in Johnson City. Had to throw that in.
Now, this is kind of a big deal for Fredericksburg. How much has your focus been on covering this lottery story?
Well, it's died down a little bit. We've got some other things going on. I know y'all heard about the flooding down on the Guadalupe and Kerrville on July the 4th, where so many people lost their lives. Actually, 136, I think, across the region. But from one camp alone, 27 young girls passed. So we've got other things brewing. But of course, the lottery, the jackpot winner is a big deal, but it's slowly fading.
So you guys think we'll never know?
That's my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't really see a world where they come forward. And also, kind of Jerry mentioning the General Nimitz being from here, LBJ was born down the road. I really think it's some sort of either tourist or transplant who just happened to be driving through the area. That's my leading theory. I think if it was an actual resident of Fredericksburg, this would have and should have come out. But I think it might be someone from down the road in Austin, or maybe someone passing through to get down to I-10 and drive through the rest of the state. So that's kind of my theory on it.
If I may, I've got to beg off. I've got to get back on the air in another studio. I'm going to leave Shane by himself.
Absolutely. We'll let you guys get back to work. We really appreciate it. And let your listeners know they can listen to us as well on Connecting America. We love having you guys on. And if you hear anything about who the winner is, give us a holler.
Absolutely. You got it.
All right. Shane Williams, Sugar Baby Shane Williams, thanks for being here. Well, if you're planning a trip to New York City this fall and want to watch the hottest shows on Broadway, our Lee Sheps has some expert tips for you.
All right, welcome to the table, our good friend Lee Sheps, because a recent New York Times article declared the Broadway musical is in trouble. The story looked at how, since COVID, only 3 new musicals, MJ and Juliet and 6, have recovered their investments. That's it, just 3. Meanwhile, about 90% of new shows have flopped, and fewer are planned for this season.
And to break it all down, we're joined by our Broadway reporter, Lee Sheps. So the Broadway musical, much more very expensive, right? Huge overhead and all of that. So it is hard for them to succeed.
Well, you know, it takes a lot of money to put on a Broadway musical, multi-millions of dollars. And if the audiences aren't going to the show and buying advance tickets, well, then the producers can't run the show on Broadway anymore. That's the biggest bottom line of that story. You know, and the headline is the Broadway musical in trouble? Well, that is a play on words from The Music Man. Well, you got trouble, my friends, in Ripper City.
How is The Music Man doing?
Well, The Music Man, it's not playing anymore. It played for a while. That show did recoup its investment, I think. Did it? I don't know. Well, actually, that was post-pandemic.
I heard Lion King.
That was a good show.
Lion King as well does well still. The Wizard. No, wait.
So The Lion King is doing well. Moulin Rouge is doing well. Aladdin is doing well.
Yes.
And you know what a lot of people are seeing?
So older musicals are doing
because
fine.
Those are the big shows that people want to see and that they know of across the country.
Mm-hmm.
For example, another big show that's doing really well is the 2024 Tony Award winner, Best Musical, The Outsiders. Why? Because it's a book that everybody knows. The Great Gatsby.
Everybody still has to read it.
Everyone has to read that.
And I was wondering about that because I saw The Great Gatsby and The Outsiders. My daughter wanted to see both of those. The sets were much more minimal than what you'd see for a Lion King. I mean, so does that help them in the fact that they don't have as much to do?
Well, the cost isn't there, right, as much for as lavish of a set. But you make an interesting point about the set. One of my good friends recently saw a show and she said she didn't like it. I loved the show. I was obsessed. It was a very New York City niche show. She did not like it because there was no sets and no costumes. So she wasn't running home to her friends to tell her to go. And a lot of it is word of mouth, right? Oh, I love The Lion King. Oh, I love Aladdin. You should go. You should go to The Gatsby. You should go to The Outsiders. So the other shows last season, there were 14 new musicals that opened and then 4 revivals that opened. Only a handful still remain. Death Becomes Her is still playing. Maybe Happy Ending, which won the Tony Award, is still playing. Just in Time is still playing and doing phenomenal. But there were shows like Boop and Smash, which I loved. I saw Smash twice, but unfortunately the show didn't last.
Mamma Mia, I know, is doing very, very well, and I can't wait to see that one, as I've made no secret about. So it was a massive number for Broadway last year. If musicals aren't the thing, what are people paying to see?
Dave, we've talked about this because last year's box office numbers were bigger than the 2018-2019 season. And here's one word for the reason why. Plays. People are flocking to go see these Hollywood A-listers star in these limited plays, right? Last season, we had Othello, we had Glengarry Glen Ross, we had George Clooney in Good Night and Good Luck. And producers are banking on these Hollywood stars who can do plays. Not everyone can do a musical, but you can do a play to see, and that's where we're seeing the numbers. But I don't want to discourage people from seeing a Broadway show because those gross numbers and those ticket prices were so high for some of those shows. Remember, last season, that was the big headline, that the ticket prices were $800, $900. Well, I was looking at the box office average ticket price for a lot of these shows, and they were in the low 100s. So it's just select these high demand shows that maybe have that high premium ticket.
That's not the price for Mamma Mia. I got to put you on the spot about one musical I've been waiting years for, my favorite movie of all time, The Greatest Showman. When is that going to come to Broadway? This would be the greatest Broadway musical ever.
It will be a great Broadway musical. Pasek and Paul, they have an EGOT. That's who wrote The Greatest Showman. I wanted to interview them a few months ago. That didn't happen. Hopefully I will get that interview. But I know they are working on The Greatest Showman, and they are also working on La La Land, the musical, as well.
All right. The Greatest Showman would be super cool if they had the trapeze and they were able to.
Just give me one with Hugh Jackman and Zac Efron.
That'd be fun.
And
just think of
probably
that
not
circus,
Zendaya.
right?
She's probably a little
think
too big.
Think of the circus, as far as and what that would look like on a stage, and I want to talk about this year too, if we still have time, because we're talking about ahead. this and what this article is also talking about in the Times. As I said, there were 14 new musicals last year. This fall, so far, we only have 2 musicals. One is The Queen of Versailles, which we've talked about on the morning show here. That's starring Kristen Chenoweth, and she's playing Jackie Siegel. She's a real person. This story is based on a documentary from the housing crisis in 2008. She went to build this mega mansion, almost like the Versailles, and and then there was the housing crisis, and everything fell apart. And then the other new musical is Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. So it is a transfer from the West End, and it stars 2 people. So those are the 2 shows of the new musicals this fall. We don't know what's coming yet this spring. There are some rumors about the Dolly Parton biomusical, which was playing in Nashville this summer. Also Purple Rain, which is based on, Prince's life, which is getting an out-of-town tryout in Minneapolis in a few weeks. And so those are 2 that maybe will be vying for a spot on Broadway this spring.
All right, well, wait and see. Thanks so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Welcome back to Connecting America on this Monday morning from the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park. Look who's joining us, our favorite server.
Morning.
Trish is here this morning. Trish, you came bearing homemade muffin treats for us.
Yeah, we had
today.
some bananas going bad, so.
That's it. That's not how you want to sell
Well,
this.
no, that's
Trish.
how you make anything with bananas
Okay.
from scratch. They have to be starting to turn.
Okay.
And then they're mashable.
Delicious.
Good.
How was your weekend?
It was good. I started the Halloween decorations, but just started.
Right, isn't it still a little early for all this?
Yeah, but it's the only thing I decorate for. I do a big Halloween, scary Halloween, not like Party City Halloween.
You know, we're talking lots of blood. And of course, you have that history of being in these, screamer films.
I do, and I just bought Caro syrup to make fake blood for some of my displays, like Brad taught us.
So this is like a big outdoor thing that
on the
happens?
whole front, because I've got a big front yard, maybe 40 feet before you hit the house, so I got a lot of space to work with.
Do you change it up every year? Is there something new that you bring to the party, or?
I'm always trying to come up with something new. Right now, I'm looking for a children's playhouse I can make look creepy, so the dolls can be having a creepy tea party outside.
What is the creepiest face you could carve into a pumpkin?
You know, that's I'm not great at pumpkin carving. I do more like creepy dolls,
set pieces.
Yeah,
I'm sure there must be a cat pumpkin.
Oh, I've got a lot of cat pumpkins, like decorative ones. They're
Because
mostly
Trish has
antique and wood.
29 cats famously at home. It's National Coffee Day, by the way. Happy caffeine.
National Coffee Day.
Yeah, happy caffeine day. There are some places that are showing off some deals in honor of National Coffee Day. So as you go across America, depending on where you like to get to your Java, you might find there's a special deal for you. There are some of the places up on your screen. Here at the Sunrise Diner, we're just happy to have coffee no matter what we have to pay for it, because it keeps us fueled. Here in the morning for 2 hours. And I know you have tables.
I do, guys, but enjoy the muffins.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trish. They're delicious. Even if they were made with, bad bananas.
What's most important is they were made with love.
They were.
Yes.
Absolutely. Hey, what's going on with golf, the Ryder Cup, with the fans, Mark? I mean, this was crazy.
Well, going to the world of sports, in terms of the sports angle with the Ryder Cup, Team Europe, Team America almost stages a furious comeback. 15-13, the final score. But unfortunately, this is not what the attention was on. Let's just say that at this course out in Long Island, people were shouting a 4-letter word starting with F at many of the players, but it was not 4.
We get the gist.
Yeah, there are situations where, look, you've got Rory McIlroy.
He put up with a lot.
Absolutely, including somebody throwing a cup of beer at his wife, Erica McIlroy, which might, of course, have to do with the fact that the beer tents were open at 9 o'clock in the morning. People are counting down, like it's a rocket launch to get, an intoxicating liquid. So this leads to problems. Now, you got to, again, wonder about the whole idea of what kind of security are we going to need at golf? And golf is supposed to be a genteel sport.
Mm-hmm.
These type of things don't happen at St. Andrews and Augusta, but now, we're seeing this here in Long Island.
We would never see this at Augusta.
No, that's almost a crime. Augusta is sacrosanct.
Do you think that they're going to change sort of how they allow spectators into this event in the future?
Sadly, it's obviously they need to.
Yeah.
And also, considering alcohol consumption might also be a very good idea.
I know I read that Rory, did his best to bite his tongue. There were a couple of moments when he did engage with the fans, but
he got feisty. On the way, when he's walking away from the course, he made sure to point at the scoreboard.
Exactly.
At the end, that's the most important thing.
Exactly.
But with other things going on, including the NFL going global increasingly. In Dublin, the first NFL home game ever played in Ireland took place. And there were some particular moments of drama behind this. You had Mike Tomlin giving a very important talk, firing up players like Aaron Rodgers, as you see walking off the field. Mike Tomlin addressed his team before the game and said, listen, remember the Rooney family, such a critical force in making the Steelers the great team historically that they are. Dan Rooney was at one point the ambassador to Ireland. So there's this personal connection. We're not just going out there for the glory of the Steelers. We're going out thinking about family. And this is what helps to make us great. And here we are in Ireland, making our game global, but there's still that personal touch back in Pittsburgh that people want to remember.
How did it go for the Steelers?
Steelers won.
Yeah.
24-21 over the Vikings.
Baseball? What's going on?
Baseball. Well, Met fans, it's another wait till next year for you.
Yeah.
Now, one's got to ask, how did this happen? In September, certain statistical organizations in baseball had the Mets at a 96% chance of making the playoffs. Seems to make sense. They've got a $340 million payroll.
Ouch.
So there should be some benefits to that. But no, the Mets went into a complete downward spiral, and on the last day of the season, missed the final wild card spot. Mind you, in June, they had the best record in baseball. And now, well, they can go watch the Ryder Cup because they can go watch golf instead of playing baseball.
They just folded.
Sad. And, goes to show the idea that the highest payroll doesn't always win.
No, it does not.
This year, the Milwaukee Brewers, the best team in baseball, has a payroll of only $116 million, a smidge of what the Mets have.
It's all about the talent.
One would think.
Yeah. All right, let's check out our national diner of the day, shall we? We're going to head to Anchorage, Alaska, and a place called Sammy's City Diner with the staff there out front. Looks like they got their own team, their own baseball team there. The family-run restaurant has a 1950s vibe outside and inside, and there's some of the food on the menu. Features all your diner breakfast staples. Some meals do come with a twist, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
They have reindeer sausage in their omelets, or as a link on the side.
Well,
what do you think? How do we feel about reindeer sausage?
That's an interesting protein choice. But, I'll say it chewy bacon instead, not crispy bacon.
All right. And they're open from 7 in the morning till 10 at night. So plenty of opportunity to try out that rainbow sausage.
Why not?
Reindeer sausage. All right. When we come right back, Serena Williams sparking a social media debate over some decor in a New York hotel. We'll tell you what that's all about when we come right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Sunrise Diner here in Roselle Park, New Jersey on this Monday morning. Can't forget about football, Mark. We didn't talk about that.
Well, look, we are
in terms of the Giants,
sitting here in a Jersey diner where many people follow the Giants. Something notable happened yesterday. Jackson Dart, rookie. There was this controversy over who's going to be quarterback. Right. He comes in and in his rookie debut leads the Giants to a definitely needed victory and rare victory this season over the Chargers. But he's saying, okay, I'm going to do my best to be a spark. And yeah, they definitely need a spark because the flame's been low for a long time for the Giants. You know, also supposedly interestingly after the game, Jackson Dart in his moment of victory decided to do a little bit of trolling. Apparently on social media, showed the picture of the quarterback for the Chargers, Justin Herbert's girlfriend. So, you know, adding insult to injury, and, you know, I'm not always sure about these quarterback names, but at the same time, I am sure that, you know, perhaps getting into somebody's personal life, you know, we're getting a little beyond.
Was there a comment on that post or what?
I don't know.
And then he took it down, as I understand.
This is getting, a little bit beyond the world of sports into something more personal.
We're getting also into tennis, but a little bit beyond the world of tennis too, because Serena Williams made some headlines last week after reacting to some decor in a New York City hotel. It was made with cotton, and she described it as uncomfortable because of its historical association with slavery. We're going to show you her clip that went viral.
All right, everyone, how do we feel about cotton as decoration? Personally, for me, it doesn't feel great. So actually, it feels like no polishing for cotton, natural.
Fan of that cotton decor. She got support from fans and celebrities alike, including Kim Kardashian and Tiana Taylor, who said her reaction was understandable. Not everyone agreed, though, Mark. Megyn Kelly had this take.
By cotton, I guess, because it used to be picked by slaves, and she's a Black American. It's 2025. Serena Williams is estimated by Forbes to be worth $350 million. I guess generational trauma, as the kids call it. She can't walk by a cotton plant in a luxury hotel to go promote Kim Kardashian's Skims line without feeling trauma that she has to videotape and post on Insta.
I don't know what to say. I mean, that's how she said she was feeling. Does Megyn Kelly really need to get that upset about it?
People feel how they're going to feel.
Yeah.
You know, you can't exactly tell them how you should feel.
Exactly. All right, so that's that. Joining us now with more on this is Jordan Reed, author of Ramshackle Glam, which tackles everything from pregnancy to parenting to anxiety. Jordan, thanks for weighing in on this. Why do you think this is striking such a nerve on both sides?
Thank you for having me. Good morning. I think that there continues to be this massive disconnect and lack of understanding about the lived experience of what people are dealing with when they're handling systemic racism on a daily basis. And what Serena Williams was pointing out was it's not about the decor. It's about the fact that these symbols are everywhere and they're very loaded. And for someone like Megyn Kelly to poke at being a hotel decor item, it's really just trying to trivialize generations of trauma into a convenient soundbite.
Right. Go further than that idea. What do you say to people who say, well, why the bother? It's just a decoration.
Well, it's not just a decoration. Cotton isn't just a plant. It is a powerful symbol loaded with associations of slavery and exploitation. And I can understand how it would feel jarring. I mean, I don't know if you recall the plantation wedding trend of a few years back. I believe Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had to apologize for that. For some people, they see a pretty background for their wedding photos. And for other people, these sites are loaded with traumatic history. And that is a reality. And, the important thing, I think, for Ms. Kelly to understand is just because you can't understand someone else's pain doesn't mean that it's not real or valid.
Is this maybe a good starting point for a conversation with parents and their kids when we talk about items that may be triggering or about symbols and history?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what Ms. Williams was modeling was a desire to open conversation and to consider alternative perspectives. And for children, you can have a conversation about how, with context, two things can mean very different things to different people. And it looks like decor, but in the context of history, it means something bigger. And it's an opportunity to, emphasize the importance of empathy, communication, education.
So, going further, Serena posted this moment on Instagram. She asked her followers how she felt about cotton as a decoration. What do you think she was trying to say? What message was she imparting? And do you think that message got through?
I think she probably knew exactly what kind of reaction she'd get from both sides. I think, like I said, she was inviting curiosity and consideration of alternative perspectives. And that's just such a healthy thing to demonstrate to kids, the importance of being willing to consider alternative perspectives than your own. And also, it's not about shaming people, it's about inviting them to reflect. And I think she did that very powerfully.
And as we know, social media, Jordan, can be a powerful way to get people talking. And
We're talking about it now.
Exactly. And maybe get a different perspective from your own, something you hadn't taken into account, right?
Absolutely. But then, I worry that, people are only hearing perspectives like Megyn Kelly's, which just is actively trying to trivialize Serena Williams' lived experience. So, hopefully the algorithm feeds you both.
All right. Jordan Reed, thanks for joining us here on Connecting America on this Monday. Hope you have a great day. Thank you. So one last look at our question of the day. It centers on the question of cheating related to the New Jersey Globe story about New Jersey Democrat Mikey Sherrill's running for governor. Report saying Sherrill was barred from walking with her graduating class with the U.S. Naval Academy for refusing to report classmates involved in a cheating scandal. She defended it as a matter of principle. So we asked, would you turn in your classmates for cheating or would you look away? And we've got the answers here on your screen. It's a split. Half the people saying, no, don't write them out. And the other half saying, well, you know what? It depends on the situation. So
Right.
we thank you for weighing in on
And
that.
always turn them in, got absolutely nothing.
Right.
Interesting.
All right. Thanks for joining us here on this Monday morning. If you want to connect with us, you can download the best of Connecting America every day wherever you get your podcasts. Just type in Connecting America in the search bar or follow us on social media. We're all over it. Have a great day, everybody.